All right, beautiful people. Today we're talking about measures of center. So our essential question is, how can we describe a data set? And we're going to be describing data through measures of center and other sorts of things. So a measure of center is a measure that represents a typical value of a data set. So some measures of center that you already know are things like mean, median, mode, and range. These are all things that you've probably heard of before, or you should have heard of before, okay? So we're going to write what each of these means. All right, the mean is the average value in a data set. It is when you add all of the numbers together and then divide by how many numbers there were. Step 1 is add all the data. Step 2 is divide by the number of data values. We'll do an example here in a minute. Let's go on to median. All right, median is the middle value in a data set. So it's whatever happens when you put all the numbers in order. It's the number directly in the middle of all of that order. And it describes the typical value of a data set because sometimes you just want to know where the middle of the data is going to be, where the center of everything is. All right, and then the mode. The mode is the most common value in a data set. And it's a typical value for a measure of center because it's the most used number. So it's obviously one that can describe the majority of the data that's in your data set. Okay. All right, so let's find some measures of center, and then we're going to talk about range. Okay, for this scenario, we're going to compare measures of center. 8 people were surveyed for their job, and these are their hourly wages for students. And so students can work for less than an adult because they're working underage, which is really kind of silly, but that's just the way that it is. So these wages are $16.50, $8.25, $8.75, $8.45, $8.65, $8.25, $9.10, and $9.25. So we're going to find first the mean. Now, some terminology with the mean. The mean is denoted with an X bar. X bar. That is the way that we call a mean. So to find the X bar, we add all the pieces together. So we're going to do 1650 plus 825, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's step 1. And step 2 is divide by how many numbers of data values. So I take that sum and I'm going to divide it by 8 because there are 8 people who are surveyed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and we're going to do that in our calculator. Okay, so the average that I got, the X bar, or the mean, was $9.65. So this is the average price that people are getting paid, or the average wage of everyone. All right, so one thing that we're going to note about the mean is notice that 965 is higher than most of the numbers in our data set. This is higher than most of the numbers. Now, why on earth is the average not right in the middle of most of our numbers in the data set? Well, the reason for that is this 1650. It's an outlier, and using the mean when you have an outlier changes what your average is going to be because the outlier affects how big or how small your mean is. Okay, so let's find the median. Remember, in order to find the median, we're going to order from smallest to biggest. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so I reordered them from the smallest to the biggest, okay? In median, I'm looking for the middle. So I'm going to cross off these numbers on the outsides until I get to the middle. Okay, notice there is no exact middle on this one. So I need to find the number in between 865 and 875. So I'm going to take 865 and add 875 to it and divide that by 2 because that'll tell me exactly the number directly in the middle of those two. And the number in the middle of those two is 8.7. You can use your calculator for this. So the median is $8.70. Okay. Notice this median is a little bit more typical. It's closer to all the other numbers that are in this data set. That's because the median isn't affected by an outlier the way that a mean is affected by an outlier. Okay. All right, last but certainly not least, let's find the mode. The mode is the most common number in the data set. For a data set like this, it's kind of easy to see because there's only one number that's repeated. And that number that's repeated is $8.25. So our mode is $8.25. Now, because our mode is at the very beginning of our data set, it's the lowest amount in our data set, this number does not necessarily describe a typical data set because it's like the lowest number. So this one is not a good measure of center because it's too low. It's the smallest number in the measure set. So what I'm saying here is that most of the people in this data set get $8.25, but that's not true. If you look at the numbers, it doesn't make sense. Now, the mean, 965, is not a good measure of center because it's higher than most. So for this specific particular data, the median is actually the best measure of center. And that's because it describes a typical value. So $8.70 is like a typical value for what people will be getting, students will be earning, okay? So it all depends on the data that is around. That's how we compare measures of center. You find all three, and then you decide which one makes the most sense for your set of data. Okay? All right, any questions? We're going to go on to a new page, and we're going to start new stuff. We're going to talk about outliers, measures of center, and measures of variation and range.